So this is the Easter season. Are you aware of that? If you've been going to church here more than a few years, you are, because every year I say to you, it didn't end. It didn't end on Easter Sunday. It's a season. And we're going to celebrate the Easter season by reading from John. And I wanted to talk to you during the remainder of this season, all the way up to Pentecost, which is May the 19th. I want to talk to you about readings from the book of John, because I think they're very poetic. I have this personal theory. I may have read it somewhere, but if I turn out to be right, let's say I didn't. Let's say I made this up. But I think a lot of the Gospel of John, I think a lot of what makes up that Gospel are pieces that were once used like liturgical readings. So for that purpose today, we did a lengthy psalm reading. For that purpose today, I had you respond to the second reading, okay? And so... And I want to look at some of that poetry. I want to show you some of the poetry in John's gospel, the poetic nature, the rhythm, the meter, the piece of life you find in these beautiful readings, and the play on words. The author is brilliant. So I'm going to offer you for the remainder of the Easter season things I call the poetry of John. To John. First would be John from the gospel that you heard today, and the other is I will bring you a poem each week, if I can find one that I can dress down, from St. John of the Cross. St. John of the Cross was born in the 16th century. He was born to parents who had been Jewish and were forced, they were born in Spain, so they were forced under the Inquisition to declare Christianity, and so that was the Christianity that St. John of the Cross inherited. He was later jailed for trying to reform his local church and spent much time in solitary confinement where he wrote most of his poetry. Today's offering is this. It's called The Sleeping Man is Blessed. What would a man buried alive do? Try with all of his strength to breathe the sun again, of course. Your hands, your feet, your eyes, your every word and thought. There is not one waking second the soul pounding against the cage of your body does not want God to rush into its lungs. The sleeping man is blessed with a faith that is not active. Faith, as it ripens, turns into an almost insatiable appetite, and the awake lion must prowl for God in places it once feared. So the end of this reading today is a very familiar piece. You know, that 3 times Jesus asked Peter this question, do you love me? And 3 times Peter responds to the question. And so some would say that the 3 times has to do with the 3 denials that Peter has made. Peter, who denied Jesus 3 times, having known him while Jesus was being beaten and condemned and executed. 1 question for each denial, and Peter is reinstated. But the problem with that piece of theology is that Jesus does not ask Peter the same question 3 times. Now you may say, well, I heard it read and it sounded like, do you love me? 3 times. Well, there is a saying Jesus is very familiar with amongst Hebrew philosophers, amongst the rabbis of his day. The saying is that the love that God gives us, the love of the will, the love of intention, is called ahava. And the poets and the philosophers of Jesus' day used to say, many rivers cannot quench ahava. Now, there were words in the Greek text that corresponded with the various words that described love in different contexts to the Hebrew people. In the Greek text, one of the words that we read today is the word agape. And the meaning of agape is simply charity. Some of you have heard agape referred to as unconditional love. Or compassion is another way to describe it. The simplest way is charity. Agape, like ahava, is a love that is reserved not only for those who love you, but for your enemies. Remember Jesus saying to his own disciples, it's easy to love people who love you. Even the heathen, he would say, do that. All of the folks who don't even have to put any effort into it make that look easy. It's a different thing to love those who don't love you. Agape is reserved for love for enemies. And remember, unconditional love is only unconditional when the recipient of that love no longer deserves it. It's easy to love someone whom you have qualified, but the one who stands undeserving, many rivers cannot quench such love. The second word in the text today for love is the Greek word phileo, which means a brotherly love. It's the love that we share in common based on things that we all agree on or things that we like. It's really the reason you join a church. We studied a very disturbing idea last Sunday night that we search for the perfect church, and when we find the one that affirms us in all of our dysfunction, we join that one because it feels best. Perhaps phileo is a wonderful thing, but Jesus knew that our enemies would show us things about ourselves that our closest brother or sister wouldn't dare. Brotherly love was to Greek culture and Greco-Roman culture the crowning piece in what they offered the world. You know, I would think I would compare it to freedom in America. Democracy has said that we have given the world freedom. It's our greatest gift to the world. Well, if you grew up in a society under Plato and Aristotle and Alexander the Great and the various Caesars over Rome, then the common thought, the philosophy of the day was that what we have given the world is brotherly love. We have found a way to be a peaceful people. And so the societies of Alexander the Great offered the world brotherly love. The disciples of Jesus and Paul particularly press on that and press on that to say that there is something yet beyond brotherly love that Jesus calls us to. It's a love reserved for enemies. Well, I always grew up thinking that, that Peter got upset with Jesus in this situation because it clearly said that he was upset because Jesus asked him a third time this same question, until I found out that it's right there in the Greek text that Jesus changes the question, that the author of John's Gospel, that this piece of poetry that bounces off of words like love and know, it changes, it turns, and it shines a light on something greater than a brotherly love. Right there. Let's take a look at it. I'm going to need your help. I need someone to play the part of Peter for me. Who would do that? Come on, somebody. Thanks. Come on, Sean. That's my guy right there. Come on, Sean. I will reluctantly play Jesus, and you can play Peter. Right here. Stand right there, okay? Now, anytime I ask him the question, do you love me? Okay, and I'm going to ask it in some different ways. I want all of you, before he answers, to do this. Hit your chest twice, stick your arm out and say, my brother. Come on, do it. Ready? My brother. Come on, one more. My brother. And every time they say that, you look me in the eye and you say, you know me by now. You got it?
Got it.
Come on, brother. Here we go. So this is the way it happens, that they're eating breakfast and Jesus is doing strange things like feeding them fish. And it's weird when you eat with a ghost. But here they're eating with the risen Jesus. And after breakfast, it says after they've had breakfast, Jesus looks at Peter and he says, Peter, would you deny me your affection? Would you deny me compassion if I did not deserve it? Do you love me?
You know me by now.
See how good this is working? And a second time, Jesus looks at him and he says, Peter, would you deny me your charity if you thought I didn't deserve it? Do you love me? I know you by now. Woo, buddy. And a third time. See, we've been talking about agape. And Peter's been talking about my brother. You know we're brothers. The third time, Jesus looks at him and he says, Peter, Are you my brother? Oh, your look changed. You couldn't do it. Sean. You see how that felt? Twice Peter said, you know me. You know I'm your brother. We're Jews. We've been through this together. You know me. And twice Jesus asked the same question, and the third time he said, Peter, I'm wondering, are you even my brother? You know, the text says that there's another word. There's another one of those poetic words that changes in the text. The first two times Peter responds, he says, you know me, eidos. You have perceived it. You have been with me. We have grown. You have an understanding. I have worked hard to teach you who I am, and you know me, Lord. You know me. Do you ever say that to someone, but you know deep down inside, what I'm really saying is there are a couple things that I have withheld from you that I'm trying to make sure right now you have not discovered about me. Because the third time when Peter asked the question, Jesus says, are you even my brother? Peter changes. Not the word for love, but the word for know. And he says, Lord, you gnosko. You know because you have experienced all things. You know me intimately. You know me better than I know myself. And then he repeats, my brother, my brother. And Jesus says, follow me. Now, I put together another reading because I think if this was poetry somewhere back in the history of the church, congregations like ours would have read this. And so I put together a reading that I want to do, and I want you to try to follow me in it. You read the big bright yellow part. Here we go. When they had finished breakfast, Jesus said to Simon Peter, Simon, son of John, do you love me more than these? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And a second time he said to him, Simon, son of John, do you love me? And he said to him, yes, Lord, you know that I love you. And he said to him the third time, Simon, son of John, do you love me? Peter felt hurt because he said to him the third time, are you even my brother? And he said to him, Lord, you know everything. You know that I love you. Jesus said to him, feed my sheep. After this, he said to him, follow me. Feed my sheep and follow me. It was after breakfast. The reading would go in that early congregation in the apostolic church, hiding behind locked doors for fear that they might be taken out and murdered for their faith in Christ, for their welcoming of the Gentiles and their rejection of the pagan systems. And there they would read, it was after breakfast when Jesus said, feed them, feed my sheep. It was the reinstatement of Peter 3 times for each denial. And it was Peter who would go on to be an apostle to the Gentiles. It was Peter who had sat with Jesus at the table of sinners and Gentiles and those who were not worthy to be in the presence of God. And it was Peter who would go on and be criticized for eating with Gentiles and taking the gospel beyond Judaism to a world that did not deserve the Son of God. It was Peter who got out with Paul and the other apostles, and they spread the word amongst the unclean world and amongst people that they did not like. It was Peter who followed Jesus in places that he would rather not have gone. And it was a lot of work for me just to get up and make it to church this morning. Shusaku Endo once said that anyone could die for the beautiful and the deserving. But who would dare die for the ugly, for the undeserving, for those who are stained, for those who are rebellious? Who would dare die for them? And yet Jesus calls to you and me today and says, follow me. And if you do, you already know that you're going someplace that you didn't want to go. You're going to be at the table with someone you didn't want to be at the table with. Did you know that life requires much forgiving? Now, I'm going to tell you that people are impossible to forgive. And you really should stop wasting your time doing that. A lot of them don't really deserve forgiveness, except that God has declared that those people are sacred to God. So you got to let it go. But maybe we've been trying to forgive the wrong things. Life requires a lot of forgiveness. There's nothing worse than a person, an adult, male, female, any creed, any skin color, any race, someone who has become jaded and cynical because of previous oppression in their lives. It's a person who's dying in their own skin. And it may be impossible to forgive a whole race of people. It may be impossible to forgive relatives and parents and leaders in civic organizations and churches who have harmed people, who have assaulted people, who have violated people. But life can be forgiven. Remember, we've got to be like the prodigal father who has the experience enough to know, that has a sense of cynicism within us that we know is based on reality and fact. And then still beyond all of that, we've got the hope and the joy to send the prodigal into the promised land and to greet life with a passion and refuse to quit, because life requires much forgiveness. So who is it today? Sometimes it's me. I have to work on letting go of things that I have just really fouled up. And some of them I did out of selfishness, and I knew it was going to hurt someone else, and I did it anyway. Sometimes, maybe I need to forgive someone at the other end of the socioeconomic bracket. I've heard so many times, I have two friends, and one of them is angry at all Republicans because he lost a house during the Reagan administration, and another one is angry at all Democrats because he lost a house in the Carter administration. And neither one of them want to talk about the amount of methamphetamines they were doing while both those men were president. I mean, seriously, I love these people. But goodness, man, they're not doing meth today, thank God. But they're still dry drunks. What are you going to do? When are you going to quit? Who is it? Who is it? Some people say, I hate all those rich people. They just don't care about anybody but themselves. And it's not true. If you know someone who has been blessed with prosperity, they're not. You can't stare. But then I hear other people say, well, why are those poor people out at Burger King on Friday night eating? Because they ain't got nothing else to look forward to. The Bible even says, you know why some people are drunk every weekend? Because their lives suck. I mean, it's really what it says. Read it. Proverbs 31. It says when life is terrible, this is all you got to look forward to. And then it's basically saying, pray this does not become you. And if it is you, get up. It's Easter. And God is resurrecting, not resuscitating, not bringing back to life what we had and what we think we want. But God is letting that go and bringing up a new thing. And it's happening right here under our noses. So today, as we move toward invitation and offering, I want you to consider a couple of things. I want you to first consider if you're called to a confession of faith and to baptism. Is that a step you've taken in your life? Have you made a confession of faith? Have you begun a serious and intentional spiritual journey with Jesus toward the Father? This is a good day to do that. Or maybe you haven't joined a church and you said, well, I kind of like going to church and I kind of like not having to go when I don't want. And I think church is a good thing, but I just, it's not in everything. But, that's not the same as getting involved in a congregation and saying, I can't make this spiritual walk alone. I need help. I need people to walk with me, and I need to be a help to someone else. Would you consider that maybe today is a day that you could make a statement that begins a commitment, not a convenience, a commitment to a congregation, to the good of that place and those people and yourself. And the third thing is this: as we consider our Easter tree and we continue to move through this season, perhaps there are some other names we haven't put up there. Like if you hate all gay people and you think they're the problem with America, I appreciate whoever chuckled at that because it is sounding pretty dang silly by now. I think Yvette Flunder said, in another 100 years, the church, in terms of how we've treated homosexuals, is going to say, they did what? But that's just one. I mean, maybe it's not gay people. Maybe it's unemployed people. Maybe it's white people or black people or Mexican people or, maybe it's young people. Maybe it's people who don't know how to buy a pair of pants that fit, so they can't. Here, I'm going to write that one on here. You think I'm kidding, don't you? That really just chaps my hiney. Yeah, and it's funny because I'm writing it on this leaf. It's funny. Pull your pants up. It's funny. Of course, there's my son trying to find himself. And I've been more worried about how his pants fit than I have been his spiritual health most of the time. So you have 3 opportunities today to make a confession of faith, to join this church by transferring your membership, or perhaps you need to put something on the tree today and say, this is where I need to start feeding sheep. This is Jesus calling me beyond my system of belonging and people who are like me and challenging me to dine with sinners. And we're going to have a verse for invitation, and then we're going to make a chance for you to give an offering, and while you do, this is open during that time. Let me ask the praise team to come forward. Will you pray with me?